The night was filled with strange sounds, sounds that made even the strongest creature tremble. The wind carried the smell of blood, dust, and fear. The alien girl was running barefoot through the broken streets of an abandoned colony. Her small feet were cut by sharp stones, but she did not stop. Behind her, the monsters howled. Their heavy claws scraped against the metal ruins. Their glowing eyes pierced the dark like fire. Her heart was beating fast, too fast. She was only a child, thin and tired, but she had been running all night. Every time she slowed down, the sound of the monsters grew louder. She wanted to scream, but she knew if she made even one mistake, they would catch her. She remembered her mother's last words before they were separated. Run, never stop, hide where the monsters cannot reach. Those words kept her alive, but also broke her heart. She didn't know if her mother was alive anymore. The ground shook as the largest monster roared. It was close. The girl turned a corner and almost slipped. Her legs were weak, but her fear was stronger. She stumbled past broken walls, fallen machines, and shadows that seemed alive. The colony had once been full of light, but now it was nothing but darkness and death. Suddenly, her foot hit a loose piece of metal. She fell hard, scraping her knee. Tears filled her eyes as she heard the monsters drawing closer. One of them screeched, a sound that made the air vibrate. She crawled behind, a pile of debris, holding her breath. Her body shook as she tried to stay silent. The monsters slowed down. They were sniffing the ground, searching for her scent. She pressed her small hand against her mouth, afraid they would hear her breathing. For a moment, she thought it was over. Then something unexpected happened. A soft sound broke the silence. It was not a growl, not a scream, but a quiet snort. The girl turned her head slowly and saw two shining eyes in the darkness. At first, she thought it was another monster. But then, out of the shadows, stepped a small creature she had never seen before. Its face was round, its ears folded, and its tail wagged gently. It was a pug. The little dog tilted its head at her as if asking why she was hiding. Its nose twitched and it made another funny snort. The girl's eyes widened. She had seen animals before, but never one like this. The pug walked closer, sniffed her hand, and then sat down as if protecting her. She was confused. Why would this small creature come near her? Didn't it sense the danger? She wanted to push it away, but before she could, the pug let out a low growl. Not at her, at something behind her. The girl's heart froze. The monsters had found her. She turned and saw them in the distance, their dark shapes moving slowly through the ruins. Their claws dragged on the ground, sparks flying. Their jaws dripped with saliva, and their eyes glowed brighter. The pug stood its ground, barking loudly now. The monsters stopped for a second, surprised by the tiny creature's courage. But then they moved again. The girl felt her chest tighten. She knew the pug couldn't protect her. They would both die. And then she saw him. From behind a collapsed wall, a tall figure stepped into view. A man. A human. His clothes were torn, his arms covered in scars. He carried a weapon she did not recognize, but his eyes. His eyes were calm, sharp, and unafraid. The girl gasped. She had heard stories of humans, but she never thought she would meet one here in this nightmare. The human looked at her once, then at the monsters. His jaw tightened. Without a word, he raised his weapon. The pug barked louder, as if calling its master. A flash of light cut through the night. The human fired, and one of the monsters fell, with a terrible cry. The others roared in anger, charging forward. The ground shook as they came closer. The girl could not move. She was frozen between fear and hope. The human shouted something she didn't understand, his voice strong and full of command. He motioned for her to come closer, to stay behind him. The pug barked again, running to her side as if guiding her. Her legs trembled, but she stood up. She didn't know why, but she trusted him. For the first time in so long, she felt something other than fear. She felt safe. But the monsters were not stopping. Their roars echoed through the ruins. The night was still full of danger. The girl didn't know who this human was or why he was here, but she knew one thing. If she stayed with him, she might live to see the dawn. And so, with the pug pressed against her leg and the human standing like a wall before her, the alien, girl took her first step into a story that would change everything. The night air was still heavy with the smell of smoke and blood when the human led the girl away. His weapon was slung across his back now, but his hand never left it. He moved, with quiet steps, like someone who had walked through danger many times before. The little pug trotted between them, sniffing the ground, its tail wagging nervously. The girl's legs felt weak. Every step was painful, but she followed because there was nowhere else to go. She didn't know this man, didn't even know his name. But the way he fought, the way he had stood between her and the monsters, it was different. No one had ever done that for her before. He glanced back at her once, his sharp eyes catching the faint glow of moonlight. "Keep close," he said, in a low voice. She didn't understand every word, but his tone was clear. He was protecting her. They walked through ruined streets, past broken machines and collapsed towers. The colony was silent now, but it was the kind of silence that warned of more danger. Somewhere out there, the monsters were still hunting. The girl's small hands trembled as she hugged herself. Finally, the man stopped at what looked like nothing more than a pile of junk. He pushed aside a heavy sheet of metal, revealing a hidden door. Without a word, he motioned her inside. The girl hesitated. She didn't trust strangers. She had seen too many lies, too many traps. But the pug barked once, wagging its tail as if to say it was safe. Slowly, she stepped inside. The shelter was dark, but warm. There were blankets spread on the floor, a small fire crackling in a corner, and shelves filled with old supplies. The human closed the door behind them, locking it tight. For the first time in days, the girl felt walls around her, not the open, deadly night. Her knees gave out. She sat down, shivering, too tired to speak. The pug waddled over and curled up, beside her, pressing its warm little body against her side. She stared at it in surprise. No one had ever given her comfort like this. The dog licked her hand softly, and a strange feeling rose in her chest. Was this what safety felt like? The human knelt near the fire, his scarred hands moving with care as he added more wood. His face was worn, his beard untrimmed, but his eyes were alive, watching everything. The girl noticed the scars on his arms, long lines, burns, old wounds. This man had seen battles she could not imagine. He handed her a small cup filled with water. She drank quickly, her dry throat burning with relief. Then he gave her a piece of bread, rough but warm. She bit into it, tears stinging her eyes. It was the first real food she had tasted in days. He said something again, slow this time, as if trying to make her understand. She only caught a few words, but she understood his meaning. "You're safe here. Rest." The girl looked at him carefully. Why was he helping her? Most beings would have left her to die. She had nothing to give. She was just a child running from monsters. Her thoughts returned to her mother. If her mother was alive, she would want her to stay here, at least for now. She pulled the blanket tighter around herself, glancing at the human again. He was silent, sitting with his back against the wall, his weapon across his knees. His eyes never closed, not even for a moment. He was waiting, guarding. The fire cracked softly. The pug snored beside her, its warm body curled up against her, thin arms. For the first time in a long while, she felt her eyelids grow heavy. She wanted to fight the sleep, but she couldn't. Exhaustion pulled her down, and slowly, she drifted into dreams. But the human did not sleep. His sharp eyes scanned the shadows, ears listening for every sound outside. He knew the monsters. They didn't stop. They never stopped. He had fought them before, and he knew what dawn would bring. When the girl stirred in her sleep, he glanced at her. She looked so small, so fragile, curled up under the blanket with the pug as her guardian. He wondered where she had come from, why the monsters were after her. He didn't have the answers yet, but he would find them. The night stretched on, heavy and quiet. Time moved slowly inside the shelter, but outside danger never rested. As the first light of dawn touched the sky, the pug suddenly lifted its head. Its ears twitched and a low growl rumbled from its throat. The girl woke with a start, clutching the blanket. She looked at the pug, then at the human. His face was already hard, his weapon raised. He didn't need to say anything. She knew. The monsters were back, and this time, they were closer. The first rays of dawn broke through the ruined colony. Weak sunlight spilled across shattered walls, but it did not bring peace. Instead, it carried a warning. The pug's growl grew louder, low and steady, its small body tense. The alien girl clutched the blanket, her wide eyes darting to the door. She didn't need words to understand. Danger was here again. The human was already moving. He grabbed his weapon, checked its chamber, and pulled a strap tight across his chest. His face was calm, but his eyes were sharp, alert like a hunter who had waited all night for the kill. The girl's heart pounded. She could hear them now, the monsters. Not close yet, but near enough that the ground itself seemed to remember their steps. The air carried their stench, foul and heavy. It made her stomach twist. The human crouched beside the door, listening. For a long moment there was only silence, broken only by the pug's soft growl. Then, a sound came. A scrape of claws against stone, slow and deliberate. Not random, not wild. The monsters were searching with purpose. The girl's blood ran, cold. They weren't just chasing anymore, they were hunting. The human spoke to her in a low voice, pointing to a corner of the shelter. She understood enough. He wanted her to stay hidden. She shook her head, fear shining in her eyes. What if he left her? What if he died fighting alone? But he didn't argue. He only gave her a look that said, "Trust me." Then he turned, back to the door. The pug barked once, sharp and angry. Outside, something moved. The human opened a small slit in the door and looked through. His jaw tightened. Shadows were crawling across the ruins. Huge, twisted shapes moved slowly, circling the shelter. Their glowing eyes shone in the morning light, and their breaths came in harsh growls. They were not rushing. They were waiting. The girl's heart sank. These creatures weren't mindless beasts. They were clever, patient, almost like soldiers. She whispered in her language, words the human could not understand. They followed me. They want me. The human glanced at her, almost as if he understood anyway. His scars spoke of experience, his calm face of battles fought before. He knew this kind of hunt, and he knew what it meant. They would not leave until they got what they came for. He started preparing traps. His movements were quick, efficient. He set small devices near the door, tied wires to metal scraps, and checked hidden switches built into the shelter. The girl watched, amazed. He was using broken parts of the colony, rusted machines, old power cells, sharp wires. Simple things, but in his hands they became weapons. She whispered softly, "Why? Why help me?" But he gave no answer. He only kept working, his jaw tight. The pug pawed at her knee, as if telling her not to worry. But she couldn't stop. Why would this human risk his life for her? He didn't know her. She was just a lost alien child. Yet here he was, standing between her and death. A sudden roar split the air. The ground shook as one of the monsters slammed into the wall outside. Dust fell from the ceiling and the fire flickered. The girl screamed and covered her ears. The human pulled her down just as another impact struck. The creatures were testing the shelter, trying to break through. The human pulled out a small round device and placed it on the ground near the entrance. Then he looked at the girl and spoke clearly. "Stay back." She didn't understand every word, but his voice was like steel. She nodded, her body trembling. The monsters scratched, slammed, and roared. Then, silence. Too much silence. The girl pressed her hands over her mouth. She could hear it, the sound of sniffing. They were smelling for her. They wanted her. Not the human, not the pug. Her. Her eyes filled with tears. She couldn't let him die for her, but before she could speak, the pug barked loudly, throwing its small body at the door. The monsters hissed, angry. The human stood tall, his weapon ready. Then with one swift movement, the creatures struck. The door shook, metal bending under their force. The human pressed the switch. A sudden blast lit the outside. One of the monsters screamed, its body caught in an explosion of fire and debris. The others howled in fury. The girl gasped. The traps worked. The human had hurt them. But more were coming, their shadows filling the ruins. The human didn't flinch. He reloaded his weapon, firelight dancing across his scarred face. He stood like a wall, unmovable, unafraid. The girl clutched the pug, her tears falling. She didn't know if they would survive this dawn. But in that moment she realized something. The monsters weren't unstoppable, not against him. And for the first time since her mother's last words, she felt a spark inside her chest. A spark of hope. But hope could be dangerous, because the monsters weren't done. They were only beginning. The ruins were quiet again, but it was the kind of silence that made the heart uneasy. Smoke curled through cracks in the shelter wall, and the air smelled of burnt flesh. Outside, one of the monsters still twitched, its body broken by the human's trap. The others had vanished into the shadows, but the girl knew they were not gone. They were waiting. The human stood by the doorway, his weapon lowered but still in his grip. His breathing was steady, calm, as though fighting monsters was nothing new to him. The girl sat near the small fire, her thin hands clutching the pug close. The little dog's warmth gave her comfort, but her eyes never left the man. Who was he? Why did he fight like that? Why wasn't he afraid? She studied him in the dim light. His scars told stories she could not guess. Some were long and jagged, others round like burns. His hands were rough, the kind of hands that had built, broken, and bled. His eyes were sharp, always moving, always watching. He didn't sit like an ordinary man. He sat like a soldier on guard. Finally, she whispered, "You fight them before?" Her voice was small, unsure. The human glanced at her. He seemed surprised she had spoken. Slowly he nodded. Then, in his rough voice, he said, "Yes. Many times." She didn't understand every word, but the nod was enough. He had faced these monsters before. That was why he moved with such confidence, why he knew where to place traps, why he wasn't afraid of the roars that made her blood run cold. But if he had fought them before, why was he here, alone in the ruins? Why live in hiding, with only a pug as his companion? The girl wanted to ask more, but her voice caught in her throat. She wasn't sure if she wanted the answers. Still, curiosity burned inside her. The human poked the fire with a piece of metal, sending sparks into the air. His face was calm, but his eyes seemed far away, like he was remembering something he did not want to remember. The pug barked once, breaking the silence. The girl jumped, but the human only sighed. He reached down and patted the little dog's head. For a moment, his hard face softened. The girl hugged her knees, whispering, "Why you help me?" He froze. His hand rested on the pug's back. He didn't answer right away. His jaw tightened and his eyes grew dark. Finally, he said, "Because no one helped me." The girl tilted her head, confused, but she felt the weight in his voice, the sadness hidden inside those simple words. She didn't need to understand every word to know what he meant. He had been alone once, like her. The fire crackled. She wanted to speak again, but before she could, a sound came from outside. A distant howl, low and drawn out. The human's head snapped toward the door. His hand gripped his weapon again. The monsters were still out there, waiting. The girl shivered. "They want me," she whispered. The human looked at her sharply. His eyes narrowed. "Why?" She lowered her gaze. Holding the pug tighter, she didn't want to tell him. She had promised her mother to keep it secret, but the way he stared, the way his eyes cut through the shadows, made her feel as though he already knew. "They follow me," she said softly. "They always follow me." The human stood slowly. He paced near the wall, his boots silent on the stone. He wasn't just thinking about the monsters, he was thinking about her. His eyes studied her, as though she were part of a puzzle he needed to solve. He muttered to himself, words she could not understand. She only caught fragments. Target, commanders, experiment. Words that made no sense to her, but filled her with unease. He stopped and turned back to her. His voice was firm now. "You stay close, do not run again, understand?" She nodded quickly. Her chest was tight, but at the same time, a strange warmth filled her heart. He wasn't going to leave her. He wasn't going to hand her over. "Theo," Pug barked again, wagging its tail. It seemed to agree. The girl looked at the man one last time before curling back under the blanket. She was afraid of the dawn, afraid of the monsters, afraid of the secret she carried. But for the first time, she wasn't afraid of the future. Not completely. Because this human, this stranger, was different. He had secrets, yes. Deep scars hidden behind calm eyes, but his presence was stronger than her fear. As she drifted toward uneasy sleep, the monsters howled again, closer this time. The human sat by the fire, weapon across his knees, his eyes sharp as ever. He did not rest. He did not blink. And though the girl didn't know it yet, the human secrets were far darker and far more important than she could ever imagine. The morning light spread slowly across the ruins, painting the broken walls with pale gold. But inside the shelter, no one felt safe. The girl sat near the fire, hugging the pug close, her eyes wide and tired. The human sat by the door, his weapon across his knees, silent and watchful. Every sound outside made the girl's heart jump. The monsters had not attacked again during the night, but their howls still echoed in the distance. The human knew what it meant. They were not retreating. They were waiting for the right moment. The girl whispered softly, They play with us." The human glanced at her. He didn't answer, but she could see in his eyes that she was right. The monsters were clever. Too clever. They weren't just beasts. They were hunters. And hunters knew how to set traps. Hours passed slowly. The girl tried to rest, but her fear was too strong. The pug licked her hand, trying to calm her. The human, meanwhile, kept moving. He checked his traps again, tightened wires, and placed more devices along the walls. His hands moved fast, steady, like someone who had done this 1,000 times before. Finally, he crouched by the girl and spoke firmly. "Stay inside. Do not open door." She understood. He was going out. Her chest tightened. "No. They wait for you." His face was hard, but not unkind. "Yes," he said simply. Then he stood and opened the door. The sunlight rushed in, and the girl squinted. She wanted to stop him, to grab his hand and beg him not to go. But the pug barked once, as if telling her to trust him. The human stepped outside, closing the door behind him. The girl pressed her ear to the wall, holding her breath. She heard his boots crunch against the rubble, then silence. The monsters were near. She could feel it. Suddenly, a roar split the air. The ground shook, and dust fell from the ceiling. The girl covered her mouth to stop a scream. Another roar followed, deeper and louder. She heard the crack of the human's weapon, sharp and powerful. Then the sound of metal snapping, stones collapsing, and something heavy crashing down. Her heart raced. She wanted to run outside, but she remembered his words. "Stay inside." She held the pug tighter, tears in her eyes. Outside, the battle was fierce. The monsters had hidden among the ruins, waiting for him to step into their circle. They charged from every side, claws slicing the air. But the human did not panic. He moved with deadly skill, firing at one, dodging another, luring them toward his traps. A loud explosion shook the ground as one of his devices went off, sending fire through the air. A monster screamed, its body torn apart. The others hesitated, but only for a moment. Then they came again, faster, angrier. The girl could hear it all, the weapon blasts, the roars, the breaking of stone. She pressed her hands over her ears, rocking back and forth. "Please, please come back," she whispered. The pug barked suddenly and scratched at the door. Its tail wagged furiously, but its eyes were sharp. The girl swallowed hard. Did it know something she didn't? Then, silence. A silence so heavy it crushed her chest. No roars, no gunfire, nothing. The girl froze. Had he fallen? Were the monsters waiting outside, ready to burst in? Her small body shook. She wanted to stay inside, but the silence was worse than the noise. She couldn't bear it. She pushed the lock with trembling hands, ignoring the pug's warning growl, and slowly opened the door. The sunlight blinded her for a moment. Then she saw it. The ruins were covered in smoke and dust. Dead monsters lay across the ground, their twisted bodies broken by fire and steel. The air smelled of burnt flesh and blood. But where was the human? She stepped out, her feet crunching on debris. The pug ran ahead, barking excitedly. It stopped near a pile of collapsed stone and wagged its tail. The girl gasped. The human was there, kneeling on one knee, his weapon in his hand. His clothes were torn, his arm bleeding, but his eyes were still sharp. He had survived. He looked at her with anger and relief mixed in his face. I said, "Stay inside." She lowered her head, ashamed, but then whispered, "I thought, you gone?" For a moment, his face softened. He sighed, wiping blood from his arm. "Not yet," he said. The pug barked, jumping happily around him, licking his hand. The girl walked closer, her fear slowly fading. But as she looked at the battlefield, her stomach turned. The monsters weren't all dead. She could see their tracks in the dust, fresh and deep. "They not finish," she whispered. The human nodded grimly. "No, they test us. Next time, they come stronger." Her heart sank. This fight was only the beginning. The monsters had laid a trap for the human, and though he had survived, it was clear they were learning, adapting. The girl stared at the human, the pug at her side. She knew now if she stayed with him, there would be no turning back. The monsters would never stop hunting her. And the human, no matter how strong, was only one man. But something inside her whispered that he was more dangerous than any army. She didn't know it yet, but the monsters had underestimated the human, and that mistake would cost them dearly. The smoke from the battle still hung over the ruins when the human pushed the girl back inside the shelter. His arm was bleeding, but he did not stop to treat it. He paced near the door, checking his weapon, reloading with quick, practiced hands. His face was tight, his eyes sharp, as if he knew the fight wasn't finished. The girl sat by the fire, hugging the pug close. Her small hands shook. She had seen the monsters fall, seen the human standing strong, but she also knew something. He didn't. The monsters weren't after him. They weren't even after his shelter. They were after her. The pug pressed its nose into her arm, whining softly, as if it sensed her fear. The girl's lips trembled. How could she keep her secret now? Outside, the silence was heavy, too heavy. Then came a sound, long, low, and full of hunger, a howl that made the walls shake. The girl gasped. These weren't the same creatures as before. These were larger, darker, their growls layered with intelligence. The human's jaw tightened. "They come," he muttered, voice low. The girl whispered, almost to herself, "They call me." The human turned, his eyes narrowing. "What?" Before she could answer, the air filled with a chorus of howls. The ground trembled as shadows moved through the ruins. The monsters weren't just hunting now, they were summoning, and the girl understood why. She buried her face in the pug's fur, tears falling. The human knelt before her, his scarred hand gripping her shoulder. "Why you?" His voice was hard, demanding. She shook her head, terrified. But when she looked into his eyes, something inside her broke. She whispered, "They want me alive, always me." His eyes hardened. "Why?" The fire crackled, throwing sparks into the air. Her voice was almost too soft to hear. "Because I am not just girl. I carry something inside. They need it." Mother said, "Never tell." The human froze, his gaze locked on hers, his mind raced. He had seen this before, in whispers and reports during wars long past. Alien children who carried codes, DNA, or secrets that could change entire empires. He realized now why the monsters hunted her like prey. She wasn't prey. She was the prize. Before he could speak, the wall shook violently. Dust rained from the ceiling. The monsters had arrived in full force, their claws scraped against metal, their growls rumbling through the earth. The girl screamed, clutching the pug tighter. The human stood, weapon ready. "Stay down," he ordered. The door burst inward, and the first monster charged through, massive and snarling. Its eyes glowed with unnatural light and its claws ripped across the floor. The human fired, the blast lighting the room, tearing into the creature's chest. It howled and collapsed, but another took its place, pushing forward with savage hunger. The shelter filled with chaos. Gunfire cracked, monsters roared, and the pug barked furiously, darting around the girl's legs. The human fought with precision, every shot a kill, every movement sharp. But the monsters kept coming, endless shadows pouring in. The girl's heart pounded. She could hear them, whispers in her mind, strange voices calling her name. The monsters weren't just roaring anymore. They were speaking broken words in her language. "Come with us, come alive, you are ours," she screamed, covering her ears. The human glanced at her, fury in his eyes. He shot another monster through the skull, then shouted over the chaos, "They talk to you?" She nodded, sobbing. "Yes, they call me, they need me." For the first time she saw something different in his eyes. Not just calm, not just battle hardness, but rage. A deep, burning rage. He turned back to the monsters, firing with renewed fury. "Over my dead body," he growled. The shelter shook, as another explosion tore through the doorway. The humans' traps lit up, shredding the attackers with fire and shrapnel. But still more came, their black shapes filling the smoke. The girl crawled behind a wall, pulling the pug close. She whispered to herself, "I am Curse. He will die for me." But when she peeked out, she saw him, bleeding, exhausted, surrounded. Yet, standing like an unbreakable wall. He wasn't fighting for himself. He was fighting for her. The monsters seemed to sense it too. Their howls grew angrier, their attacks more desperate. They wanted her alive. But to get her, they had to break him. The girl's chest ached. She had lost her mother to these creatures. She couldn't lose him too. But she was powerless, just a small child with nothing but fear. Still, something inside her stirred. A memory of her mother's last words. "You are more than you know. Never forget." The pug barked loudly, as if urging her. She placed a trembling hand on the ground, and for a moment something strange happened. The air shimmered faintly, a pulse of energy spreading from her palm. The monsters froze, their glowing eyes flickering. The human turned, shock flashing across his face. "What was that?" The girl shook her head, terrified. I don't know, but they fear it." The monsters snarled, retreating a step, their growls uncertain now. The humans seized the chance, firing again, driving them back. The shelter filled with silence once more, broken only by the girl's sobs and the human's heavy breathing. The pug sat beside her, licking her tears away. The human knelt, gripping her shoulders firmly. His eyes burned into hers. "Listen to me. They don't want you dead. That means we have power, but you must tell me everything. No more secrets." She swallowed hard, nodding. She had no choice now. The secret was out, and as dawn's light pushed through the smoke, the human understood something chilling. This wasn't just a fight to survive the night. This was a war, and the key to it was the small alien girl curled up with his pug. The morning sun broke through the smoke, painting the ruins with pale gold. The air still smelled of blood and ash. Dead monsters lay scattered across the ground, their bodies twisted in unnatural shapes. The girl sat near the fire, the pug pressed tightly against her side. Her small hands still trembled, but her eyes were no longer only filled with fear. There was something else now. Something new. The human sat across from her, his weapon across his knees, his arm wrapped in a strip of cloth to stop the bleeding. His face was hard as stone, but his eyes never left her. He had seen the pulse of power from her hand, the way it had shaken the monsters. He knew she was hiding something greater than fear. Finally, he spoke. "What are you?" The girl looked down at her lap. She wanted to stay silent, but she knew the time for secrets was over. Her mother's last words echoed in her mind. "Never forget who you are. I am not just child," she whispered. Her voice cracked, but she continued. "My people made me carrier. Inside me, there is code, a map, a key. Monsters want it." The human's jaw tightened. He understood now. She wasn't just a frightened girl running from danger. She was the center of it. Her very existence was a weapon, or a treasure, that others would kill to possess. The pug barked once, as if agreeing. The girl's tears spilled down her cheeks. "Because of me, mother die. Because of me, they never stop. You will die too." The human leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "No," he said firmly. "I decide my fight. Not them." She looked at him, confused. He had no reason to protect her. She was a burden, hunted, cursed. And yet here he was, bleeding, exhausted, and still standing between her and death. He reached out, placing a rough, scarred hand on her shoulder. His grip was steady, strong. "Listen," he said. "You are not curse, you are hope. They want you alive. That means you are worth more than all their roars and claws, you hear me?" Her lips trembled. Hope. The word felt strange, almost impossible. But in his eyes, she saw it. He believed it. The pug licked her hand, its small, tail wagging. She let out a shaky laugh through her tears, hugging it close. Outside, the ruins were quiet, but both of them knew it wouldn't last. The monsters had retreated, but not defeated. They would come again, stronger than before. The human stood, slinging his weapon over his shoulder. His movements were stiff with pain, but his presence was unshaken. He looked at the broken horizon, then back at the girl. "We can't stay, too dangerous." Her eyes widened. "Go? Where?" He glanced at the sky. "Far, away from here, somewhere they can't find easy." The girl's chest tightened. She had nowhere to go, no family, no home, but when he said we, her heart warmed. She wasn't alone anymore. She nodded slowly. "I go with you." The human gave a small, rare smile. It was brief, but it lit his scarred face in a way that made her chest feel lighter. "Good," he said simply. The pug barked happily, circling around them. Together they gathered what little they could carry: food, water, scraps of equipment. The human checked his traps one last time, then led the way out of the shelter. The girl followed, clutching the pug in her arms. The colony stretched before them, empty and broken. The sunlight glowed on twisted metal and shattered towers. Somewhere, beyond, the monsters waited. But the girl no longer felt only fear. She had the human beside her and the pug pressed against her chest. For the first time since her mother's death, she believed she might survive. As they walked, the girl spoke softly. "You never tell me name." The human glanced at her. For a moment he seemed to hesitate, as if the word carried weight. Then he said, "Daniel." She repeated it slowly. "Dan, E.L." It felt strange on her tongue, but warm. She smiled faintly. "I am Lyra." He nodded once. "Lyra." The pug barked again as if saying its own name, though it was only a sound. Both of them laughed, a brief moment of light in the heavy air. The laughter faded quickly, but it left behind something stronger than fear. A bond. As they walked into the sunlight, Daniel's eyes scanned the horizon. He knew the monsters weren't finished. They would hunt again, and the next battles would be harder. But he also knew this. He would not abandon the girl. He had seen enough death, enough loss. This time he would fight for something worth protecting. Lyra walked close beside him, her small hand brushing against his arm. She still carried the secret, the code, the key the monsters wanted, but she also carried something new inside her: trust. The pug trotted between them, tail high, as if it understood that something important had begun. And so, in the ruins of a broken world under the pale light of dawn, a human, an alien girl, and a stubborn little pug formed a bond stronger than fear. A bond that even monsters would one day learn to fear, because together they were no longer prey. They were family,